The ending of Dream of the Red Chamber is foreshadowed in Baoyu's dream. What does that mean? It means that Baoyu goes on a spiritual journey in a dreamlike realm, where he sees the Book of Life in a drawer in the main hall's cabinet. The verdict of the 12 beauties of Jinling is written in the 5th chapter, and the 80th chapter only hints at the tragic tone, with the tragedy just starting to unfold, making it hard to fully understand the ultimate outcome. To know what happens in the end, we need to read the last 40 chapters. The last 40 chapters have fewer chapters compared to the first half of the book, but major events happen one after another, leading to destruction, decay, and death, which aligns with the saying, after the food and the birds are gone, nothing remains but the barren earth. Lu Xun generally affirms the last 40 chapters as they continue the tragic storyline. However, the ending is somewhat uplifting, with characters like Jia Lan passing the imperial examination, right? Before Baoyu becomes a monk, after he marries Bao Chai, she is already pregnant, and after his departure, Baoyu actually has an illegitimate child named Jia Gui. The character Gui in Gillen's landscape sounds like wealth and nobility. Later, they are called Lan Gui Chi Fong, with one being Jia Lan and the other being Baoyu's son, reviving the Jia family. This ending was not Chao Shuoqin's original intention. Therefore, Mr. Lu Xun also points out this flaw, calling it a slightly uplifting ending. Lu Xun's evaluation is very concise, right? We can agree with Lu Xun's evaluation of the last 40 chapters. He is not like Yu Pingbo, who heavily criticized the last 40 chapters back then. Although Yu Pingbo later retracted, saying that Gao Yi's completion of Dream of the Red Chamber was a great achievement, and that his criticism of the last 40 chapters was a great mistake. This was Yu Pingbo's repentance in his later years. So, we have briefly discussed the love story of Baoyu and Dayu. Now, let's move on to the final lecture and examine the fate of Chinese culture from the perspective of the book's grand finale. In the previous conversation, we discussed a situation where the imperial court had seized the garden, but it turned out that there was much infighting before that within the Jia property. This chapter of the novel was referred to as Slander instigated search into Guan Garden. In the midst of this conflict between the two factions, Tanchun had already realized that their family could not be saved. So, when Tanchun was approached, she uttered a heartbreaking statement. She expressed that it was impossible for an influential family like theirs to be easily destroyed from the outside. It reminded her of an old saying that a 100-legged insect may be dead but still twitching, implying that it can only be completely defeated through self-destruction. Tanchun's words were accompanied by tears, emphasizing the emotional weight of the situation. Alright, let's now take a look at the story of how Slander led to the self-imposed search into Guan Garden, which is a significant plot point in the first 80 chapters of the story. Of course, there is also the character of Sister Big, who is known as the foolish elder sister. Her laughter is known to forebode death in the family, and when she cries, it also forebodes death. Let's use her as a starting point, just like the role of a catalyst in traditional Chinese medicine. Sister Big saw the erotic pictures, right? She found them in a scented sachet in the Guan Garden, and when Lady Xing saw it, she used it as evidence to confront Lady Wang's faction. This eventually led to mushrooming infighting and the search into Guan Garden. When, they all had different reactions to the seizure. But when Yingchun found out, she just shrugged it off. She's got this Taoist vibe, you know? Like, hey, it's not my problem how you deal with it. And then, everyone around just cracked up. So, the whole thing actually went down, right? Turns out Yingchun's nanny is a real gambler. She swiped Yingchun's stuff and either sold it off or pawned it to get cash for her gambling habit. Isn't that a major no-no? But Yingchun's like, I'm out, you guys figure it out. She even brought out this book called The Book of Supreme Harmony and started chatting about it with Bao Chai. Then there's Lin Dayu, usually minding her own business, but she couldn't hold back. She's like, "Who are you, really? Tigers and wolves are at the door, and you're still talking about cause and effect?" Even with all the chaos going on, Yingchun's still all about that Taoist life, you know? Taoism is all about avoiding trouble, right? The teachings of Laozi and Zhuangzi, with their Tao Te Ching and Zhuangzi's books, were actually written during the crazy warring states period. They were all about how to escape the madness of the world during tough times. And that's where Yingchun's head's at. So, what about Xichun then? Well, she's got a different approach altogether. As I mentioned earlier, when we compare the attitudes of Yingchun and Xichun, we can really see the decline of Chinese cultural vitality. Taoism, of course, can't do much to save this family from its downfall. Tanchun, on the other hand, represents legalism. She actually tried to bring about some reforms, but sadly, they didn't make much of a difference in the end. Now, the question remains, what about Xichun? Oh man, Xichun found out about it and things got messy. Turns out, one of her personal maids had been secretly hoarding stuff like gold and silver fruits, and even men's socks and boots. When Xichun discovered this, she completely changed her attitude and immediately ordered the maid to be dragged out, either to be killed, beaten, or kicked out. She made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with it. This maid, Ru Hua, had been serving Xichun for years. In a situation like this, you'd expect the mistress to support and protect her personal maid. But Xichun's attitude was unexpectedly cold. Ru Hua spilled the beans and explained what really happened. She had followed Xichun from Ning Palace to Rong Palace because grandmother Jia wanted all her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to live close by. Xichun was Jia Zhen's sister, who lived in Ning Palace. So, grandmother Jia wanted Xichun to live in Rong Palace. And of course, Ru Hua came along. Originally, Ru Hua was a maid in Ning Palace, and her brother worked as a servant for Jia Zhen. Jia Zhen really liked him and often gave him gifts. But her brother felt it was inappropriate to keep the gifts, so he would send them to Rong Palace and ask Ru Hua to keep them for him. And that's how these items were discovered. Ru Hua spilled the beans, and Aunt Shui was there too, as she was also affected by the seizure. Aunt Shui insisted on a thorough investigation. If what Ru Hua said was true, then there wouldn't be a problem, but she made it clear that such actions shouldn't happen again. Ru Hua begged Aunt Shui to punish her, but Aunt Shui had a valid reason not to. Why? Well, Ru Hua was a maid from Ning Palace, so if any punishment was to be given, it should be done by Ning Palace, not by people from Rong Palace. So, at that moment, nothing was done except for keeping a close eye on Ru Hua. The next day, Lady Yu showed up. Lady Yu was the wife of Jia Zhen of Ning Palace, so she was Xichun's sister-in-law. When Xichun found out that Lady Yu had come from Ning Palace, she had someone fetch her so they could have a chat. Let's dive into this part. On that day, after Lady Yu visited Feng Jia and hung out in the garden for a while, she wanted to go and say hi to the other sisters. But then she got a message from Xichun, asking her to come to her room. When Lady Yu arrived, Xichun spilled the beans about what went down the previous night when they found stuff during the search. She even had all the items brought in for Lady Yu to see. Lady Yu was like, "Hold up, those things were rewards given to her brother by your brother. They shouldn't have been sneaked over here. Now, official salt has turned into private salt." And she scolded Ru Hua for being dumb and confused. Then Xichun was like, "Yeah, it's our fault for not keeping a tight leash on her. She's the only maid among all the sisters who pulled this kind of stunt. How am I supposed to face people?" I even asked Feng Jia to take her with her, but she refused. I get it, she's from the other side, so Feng Jia had her reasons. I was planning to send her over today, but it's great that you're here, sister-in-law. You can take her with you, beat her, kill her, sell her, I don't care. At this point, Ru Hua got desperate and dropped to her knees, begging for mercy. I won't ever do it again. Please, miss, consider our long-standing relationship and let us stick together, even in life or death. Others joined in, trying to persuade Xichun, saying that Ru Hua just made a dumb mistake and won't do it again. She's been serving Xichun since she was a kid, so she should be kept around. But despite being young, Xichun had this stubborn and solitary nature that never backed down. No matter what anyone said, she believed she had lost face and firmly refused. She even said, "Not only do I not want Ru Hua, but now that I'm older, it's also inconvenient for me to go to your Ning Palace." What kind of place has Ning Palace turned into? She went on, "Plus, I've been hearing rumors lately about people talking trash behind my back. If I go there again, I'll be dragged into their schemes." Lady Yu was saddened by these words. Xichun didn't want to go back to Ning Palace because it was a messy place. The conversation that followed was pretty interesting. From this chat, we can see what kind of person Xichun is and how a Buddhist person can be so ruthless. It actually makes sense.